Hello folks, I am Pars, a data science student based in Toronto, and in this video I'm going to show you how note-taking on iPad is exponentially better than any other note-taking method. Secondly, we're going to briefly discuss which iPad should you buy if you're trying to get one. And finally, I'm going to show you my scientific method to take extraordinary notes, which will improve your productivity. Let's get started. So why note-taking is exponentially better on iPads? There are two reasons for it. First is production rate, and second one is time efficiency. So when I say production rate, let me give you an example to actually explain the concept. For example, in your new semester, you got introduced to a new subject called reinforcement learning. You never heard of it, you don't know what that is, so it is obvious that you will have lots of questions about that subject. Typically what we do is we go on the internet and try to find actual answers to all of these questions. Once we find out all of the answers, we go to our note-taking device and write down all of the notes in the piece of paper. Now this approach is not efficient at all. Because you're hopping between internet and your physical notebooks, you're starting over and over again among all of them. And that leads to lots of context switching residue. And because of that, you're not performing optimally in any of them. Now, let's change this. Instead of internet and your notebook, we will just use an iPad in split screen mode where you have Safari open in one hand and on the other hand, you have your note-taking app open. Now, anytime you have any sort of question, you just research it, figure out the answer, understand the answer, and just drag and drop all of the context that you need in your notebook. And by doing so, there is no context switching. You are doing everything in one place, meaning your production rate increases. The second reason is time efficiency. Let me give you an example. Recently, I've had an exam in machine learning. It was an open book exam, nothing too hard, but there was a question about a backpropagation algorithm. And there was an equation for that. I wrote that equation down somewhere in my notebook, but I was not sure where exactly. And it took me 5 to 7 minutes to actually find it because I had like 3 notebooks where I actually jotted down all of the equations and my practice assignments. And I lost a valuable 7 minutes. Now, if I had an iPad at that moment, I would have just searched for the equation that I was looking for, and barely in seconds I would be able to find it. It just helps that the handwritten character recognition inside almost every note-taking app is just able to pinpoint the location where you took the actual note. And these are just 2 reasons. There are several reasons why you should actually change your note-taking methods to your iPad instead of physical paper. Some of them are like, you don't have to carry your notes, especially for me, because my lecture starts from 6 p.m. to 10. And after a long day of work, it's just a joy to just come home and get your iPad and go to the lecture instead of trying to get all the books that you need for that particular day and then putting them in your bag and then going. I think there is a minor downside to using iPad is that you don't feel like that you're writing on a piece of paper. But even in that case, you can get a paper-like screen protector and get a feeling of writing on actual piece of paper. I have given a link to paper-like screen protector down in the description below. Well, now we have established that iPads are the best way to take notes by far. Which iPad should you get? Firstly, you don't need to worry about iPad mini. If you are buying an iPad to take notes, you will not be satisfied with iPad mini screen because the screen real estate is not what you actually need from an iPad. So now we have only 3 options available: the baseline iPad, the iPad Air, finally the iPad Pro. If budget is a major issue, then without a doubt, just get yourself an iPad, which is a baseline model. Here in Canada, it's about $400 for every student because you get a student discount, and you should be fine. You won't be missing out on most of the features. But the major question comes between iPad Pro and iPad Air. And 95% of the people who are actually thinking of getting themselves an iPad just to take notes should exclusively get iPad Air because you're getting the M1 chip and almost 95% of the iPad features that are actually going to be useful to you in order to take good notes. The only reason for you to go and upgrade to iPad Pro is that if you're going to be using your iPad to not only take notes but make professional content with it, whether it's Procreate design or editing videos on it. If you're going to use your iPad as exclusive workstation, then get yourself an iPad Pro. and that should be your only reason to upgrade. I personally bought myself an iPad Air initially in the student season with great discounts, but because it has a smaller screen size, I was not able to use that iPad to its maximum potential. The smaller screen was the only reason for me to go and actually upgrade myself to iPad Pro 12.9 inches. Because it has a bigger screen, I was able to utilize that more. Except for iPad mini, I have given Amazon affiliate links down in the description for all of these iPads. Please check it out. Now let me explain how I take my notes. Typically, you're supposed to go through your presentation slides before you actually go into your lecture. I am very responsible, so I obviously don't do that. When I'm attending my lecture, I open lecture slides in Notability and I annotate the lecture slides depending upon what kind of context it is in. For example, if it's an equation that is really important, I'll highlight it, draw a box around it, draw an arrow on it. Recently, in one of my lectures, a professor actually gave out one of these nugget of information that is really useful. They gave out a name of a library that we are supposed to study upon. And so I just write down the name of the library and put a hyperlink to it from the web on there. So when I go home and actually go through my notes, I know which leads to follow so that I can prepare much better. Sometimes professor actually goes to different websites to show the class some important lecture notes or some important topics that they are not covering but really important for the subject overall. So I just take my iPad and take a picture with it and import it directly into my note. So when I go home and go through my notes, not only I have a cohesive picture of the lecture, but not missing out on any critical information which was released during the lecture. The purpose of taking notes is to distill down all of the information, so when the time comes to actually test your knowledge, you are well aware that what information actually contains value and what is just fluff. Another really special feature of taking notes on your iPad is the connectivity between your Mac and iPad. There are some programs in my course which are exclusively running on Windows or Mac OS but not on iPad OS. So in that case, if you want to take a screenshot of that feature, you can just take a picture with your phone and send it to your iPad, or even better, you can take a screenshot on your Mac, annotate it however you want, and you just copy paste it to your iPad and immediately that image is available in your notes. So once I've distilled out all of the information and understood it way better than previously, I finally go and create aesthetically pleasing notes of maybe 2 or 4 pages where I put down all of the information that I learned so far and try to convey it in a really visual manner so that when the time for revisions come, I only have to go through those 4 pages and I already have understanding of the whole chapter. Is the scientific method famously known as Feynman technique. It's a version of Feynman technique where you just go through the material roughly, figure out the questions, and then you go through all of the subject material a second time, but now this time at a much more deeper level. Once you figured it all out, try to put it in a very distilled manner so that even a person with less technical knowledge can understand it. And that is how I take my notes. In this video, I've showed you why iPad is the best option for note taking, which iPad to buy, and finally, how to take notes. Thanks for watching. Stay connected.